All right, as you come in today, we want to have you please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, name, organization, your position, and most importantly, what you hope to learn today from these great speakers that we have coming out of Houston, Texas. We'll give it a few seconds here to load everybody in. I hope you've been enjoying the sessions. I have had more sessions than I can manage, so I can't wait to hear some of the recordings too. And I noticed the recordings are already going up. So if you were like me and being a little indecisive, you can go back and listen to some of these great sessions. Okay, I'm going to get started here. Thanks everyone for coming today and joining what I think is going to be a great way to start rounding out the end of these discussions related to employer engagement in adult education, really a prime focus of what we have been talking about in many of the sessions today. I'm Anson Green, I'm with Tyson Foods, and I help manage a system at Tyson of about 50 adult education partnerships across 16 states. These are AFLA funded providers in different states that are working in our Tyson plants to do workplace literacy programs. One of these programs is in Houston, Texas, and that's who we're going to hear from today. So I was previously the state director for adult education, so I know the business of adult ed really well. But we're going to talk about how that interweaves with the success of workplace literacy models in the sector of workplace literacy. We're going to have some polling today, so get ready for that. But I want to talk about our fantastic presenters here. So we have Angela Johnson, who I've known for many years. She has 20 years of experience in adult education coming out of Houston, Texas. And I really think of Angela as the go-to program administrator and presenter. She's so articulate, but she has led huge distance learning efforts, workforce development efforts, really a go-to person on the topic of internationally trained professionals in the workforce. And I would say in Texas, which is a whopper of a state, one of the best when it comes to workplace literacy. So she's going to be bringing that administrative eye to this and that kind of expertise in her cool way and her just really insightful way. And she's had such a great impact on Houston in terms of just the oil and gas industry and the construction industries, as well as healthcare. I mean, she's had big impacts in that Houston community, which is a really vibrant area for workforce development. She's working on her dissertation right now on grit in developmental education, and I can't wait to see that. I hope she asked me to be a proofreader of that. And then we want to move over to Alejandra, who is also at this nonprofit, Baker Ripley. They're both with a nonprofit in Houston, Baker Ripley, which is really a systems kind of nexus for the Houston community for adult education, workforce development, community-based services. I mean, every time I look in Twitter, something new is coming out of Baker Ripley. Alejandra works there as the digital literacy coordinator. And digital literacy is really going to be a backdrop of when we talk about our employer engagement models here as a model for kind of how to best engage employers. She has worked on this digital literacy topic with over 350 participants since they started piloting in the fall of 2019. So a lot of deep learning, and what we're going to hear about is a digital literacy program at a Tyson plant and what that looks like. She comes in with all kinds of exciting experience. I loved this bio. She worked in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. She's worked in Angola. She's got great roots in the business community, working at Nexton in Houston, and is an account manager for Alcatel. So she's one of those rare breed adult educators that has this business backbone and insight. And you will know when you hear her talk about what they're doing in the area. She's got an MS degree and a BS degree from Bogota in electrical engineering. And I love her line about what she does in her spare time. She does yoga, walking, road cycling, but she really has no spare time. And that is so true. This lady is all over the place. So let's do some polls real quick. And let's see where you guys are coming from in terms of perspective. So check the poll out and do a quick launch for me. And let's see where you're coming from. Okay, we've got a few employers in here, teachers, adult education administrators, some nonprofits, immigrant and refugee organizations. So we have a great collection of groups in the audience today, and I really want to hear from this feedback. 45% from adult education administrators, which is really what I was hoping for, because this is what this session is all about, is about connecting to the adult education systems in the most effective way that we can. The goal of our session is really to kind of get past that first meeting when you meet with employers. I talk to adult educators and employers all the time, and they really struggle engaging with employers. And we wanted to really bring what we've learned as service providers in this area to show you just what it takes. It's not rocket science, but there are some best practices that will really, really help programs shine and build that credibility with the employer community. It's all about this employer relationship and these pitfalls. I mean, we see these pitfalls in the relationship building, and I think a lot of it is because, you know, adult educators are largely educators, and they're kind of a fish out of water sometimes when it comes to working with employers. That was my perspective years ago when I first started this. And so we really through this kind of presentation and through efforts like Behind Every Employer, which you've heard a lot about today, we really want to bridge that gap and figure out what are the keys to making it through that first meeting and to the next, to really building a vibrant program and something that's really beneficial and impactful. We're going to do like an interesting way to facilitate this session. We want to kind of talk about the research and talk about like what best practices say, but we want to do it in the context of what Alejandra and Angela are implementing today in a Tyson plant with Tyson workers in a digital literacy class that's provided through an adult education provider. So we'll be able to get some real firsthand evidence and then really benchmark that with what we're hearing in the research about these kind of programs. You might ask, well, what kind of research is out there? And I would say there's honestly not much research on workplace literacy, which is a huge area of development that we need to really put our nose to the grindstone and take part in. I've put some of the things up there that I love the most. This is really Anson's reading list. It's not comprehensive at all, but some of these actually go back to like 2007, 2001. And that's how deep you have to dig for some best practices sometimes. So there's more promise in kind of figuring out what you hear on the street than there is in the research literature, which is a crying shame. We've got a lot of research on IETs and things like that, but not much on workplace literacy. So we definitely need to build that, but these are some really good resources. When you get the PowerPoint, there are active links in here. So let's really talk about the promise of this workplace literacy model and what we're really trying to get accomplished here. And what we want to do is back up a little bit and hear about the program that we have going on in Houston. And I think that the theme that always comes through is when you look at the labor market and what needs to happen for businesses, and then you look at the adult education classroom, you really see that we should be best friends, because businesses need entry-level workers. They need them to stay. They want to grow them. And our core competency is entry level. You know, we've got that skill set. So I think everybody should walk away from the events today and really think about like, man, we are like the best positioned in our community to help our business community out. What are we doing to get there? We've got a lot of bottom line benefits that you see for employers. Frontline turnover is costly. Hidden talent can be identified, but businesses aren't the best at sometimes assessing the skills of underskilled and immigrant populations. Businesses want safer, leaner production, less accidents, and really the added benefit of really being a morale booster by providing things like workplace literacy for their workers. I work with the Tyson plants all the time, and you just hear these themes over and over. But they're used to working with higher skilled workers when it comes to education and training. When they get into the front line, to the entry level, to the helper level, they just sometimes don't have that core competency. And that's where adult education is so important. And then by providing workplace literacy programs, there's all this, what I call reputational benefits for the employer. When the word on the street is that your business is the place where you can go to an ESL class, you become a place that immigrant and refugee workers want to go work because they want to go to ESL class too. And if they can do the two things together, that's a win-win for the worker. And they tell their friends about it because it really shows that rather than being a deficit, not speaking English, it's something that's embraced and cultured at the business. They also work as great recruiters, man. You have a great customer and a worker that's in an ESL class at a company, they're going to tell their friends and tell their relatives to go work there. And what I see for the schools is also important because the schools all of a sudden get the reputation as being the school of choice for the business community when it comes to working with that population. So think about those things. And then for you adult educators, we're talking about reaching, first off, enrollments. These are workers that can't come to your class because they're working, or they're working 2 jobs or 3 jobs. So you're reaching a part of your community that you haven't yet accessed, but they sure do need your assistance. There is lots to be learned for curriculum. When you have working with a business, Alejandra and Angela will tell you, they're taking what they learn at Tyson and other businesses and using that in their IET programs, using that in their models for assessment. So there's a lot of kind of learning that happens, experiential professional development, I sometimes call it, where people are learning and really building their skills in a unique area with a business culture and climate. And then, of course, you get the reputation as being the public sector provider in the community that everybody can get along with, because it's not the education provider that doesn't listen to us. It's the one that is opening the door and really collaborating. And that expands like wildfire in the business community. So keep these things in mind when you wonder, what are we talking about when it comes to the benefits for workplace literacy for your adult education organization. So let's talk about this context that Alejandra is so instrumentally involved in right now with Angela in this digital literacy class in Houston. I'm going to turn it over to them, and they can just say next when it's ready for the next slide there. So take it away, folks.
Okay, so in the following 3 slides, I am going to tell you a little bit about our program. So Baker, Ripley, and Tyson have worked together to deliver this program to their team members. That's how they call their employees. So here we have the description of our program, but of course we had to make it like have a very good intention about the objectives that we wanted to cover with this program with Tyson. So you see that we had to adapt really our curriculum, our assessments, so we could deliver what Tyson wanted us to deliver at the end of this class. So we can go to the next slide, Anson. So here is how our group looks like. We had like 28 teammates. Again, that's how the employees are called in Tyson. We started with 28. We had about 5 team members that dropped out. And I just wanted to highlight here what was the main challenge. So the main challenge was transportation for the team members. So most of them just share rides, and that is a challenge to get in time in class, etc., etc. And here in these 2 graphics, you will see that this is a very multi-level class in different aspects. In terms of their highest level of education and also in their English proficiency, right? So it's very interesting and very challenging because we wanted to say yes to everyone that wanted to join the class, and we did. And it was fun, and we learned a lot through this experience. Next, Anson. Okay, so here are the preliminary results because they are in class at this moment as we speak. So in the blue bars, you will see what was the level that they came in with. We used North Star as our assessment instrument. And then in the green bar is their learning gains on the basic computer skills test. So here you see again, it is a very, very multi-level class. And again, it was like a great space to learn a lot, because in our regular classes, we usually don't have this kind of composition in the classes. And I just want to highlight here very quick what are our keys to success. And we're going to go deeper in this. So we came with a consulting approach. We got the buy-in from all really impacted stakeholders at Tyson. We were directly involved in the recruitment efforts, and access to technology was key. We were able to bring Chromebooks and MIFIs to the classroom, so all students had access to the same technology, and this facilitated really the class. And finally, we also offer bilingual instruction. The assessment tool, I see a question there. It was the North Star. So we've been working with them for about almost 3 years already. So growing with them really, because it's a program that is also evolving day by day.
All right, man, great overview. And I want to just review a couple of points. So first off, you see this really diverse population on all aspects. And then you've got also a diversity in language ability in the class. And I would say that's very common in workplace literacy programs, and something that kind of rubs against the grain of adult education programs in the community sometimes, because we're trying to get leveled classes and we're trying to kind of smooth out those ripples. But when you go to a work site, you know, it is a limited pool of workers, and that's the group you want to have to work with. Now you have to be reasonable about it, but I think the key here is the flexibility that we see Baker Ripley providing, saying this is the normal context. We can't fight against these levels. We can't fight against these elements. We've got to find ways to work with it. And so what really gets me excited about, you see these keys to success. First off, that first bullet, this consulting approach. Like, those are not even words that we use in adult education much, but you can see that they come in to really figure out how to work best with what is being offered and what is needed by the business. Some other things that are unique about this as we move into our discussion is it's a digital literacy class. And I can tell you, as an employer for a Fortune 100 company, that is the name of the game when it comes to literacy in businesses right now, wanting to upskill workers in the digital area. So if you're sitting there wondering about, like, how do I get in with an employer, digital is a calling card. I can tell you that right now. Digital and English language are huge. The other things that are very interesting is that they chose to use a bilingual model in this program, and you're going to hear us talk about that. That is something not common in adult education, but when we looked at what we were trying to accomplish, which is digital literacy, it became very apparent that because we had this unified group of workers where Spanish was the second language, we could really accelerate a lot of the learning and instruction in the native language, and then get to the critical English skills at the same time. And that is an area where careful assessment kind of led you to believe, like, this is the best way to go. And then the other thing that really blows my mind when I look at these outcomes here, look at this: 28 enrolled, 5 have dropped out, with the main challenge being transportation. We would all be proud of those, but keep in mind, this is a remote learning class also. So it's not one of these things where the teacher's showing up in the plant and teaching. The teacher is remoting in to the learning space for the workers. So that has all these extra logistical challenges, I think, for lack of a better word, that they said, you know, using our consulting approach, we're going to build that as a normal and work around it. So you see from the very beginning here, a lot of creativity, a lot of out of the box models for what I would consider an AFLA program. And this customization, I think, is something you're just going to hear over and over and over. The backdrop too is this. We were having a hard time, Angela and I, getting services started back in this plant, in this Tyson plant. I might work at the corporate office, but I can't go tell a plant, you're going to do an ESL class today. I have to negotiate and work with the plant. And Angela and I worked for almost a year to find a hook back into the plant. And it was during the pandemic, so there was a lot of like good reasons why this was going to be hard. But we found that as soon as the opportunity for digital literacy came up, the light bulbs came on. And I would say, and I think Angela would agree, there was still some hesitancy, but we just came on strong. We talked to management, and they let us have our foot back in the door over there during the pandemic. And so Angela and I, we swapped notes, you know, prior to launching, and basically said, we're gonna win on this no matter what. She did by putting in Alejandra and a great instructor. But I think it was also one of these things where this wasn't a slam dunk. This wasn't some corporate driven thing where Anson was saying, you're gonna do this or else. We had to negotiate. We had to talk through it. We had to spend a lot of time finding the hook. And that's normal when you work with workplace literacy programs. So you have to have that kind of patience and really the kind of ability to listen well and find that vibe. So let's talk about the case study a little bit more and learn more about what was critical in this. And we're going to kind of facilitate the next part of this as a discussion point. So that's me and a colleague, Charlie Hinton. We were down there recruiting. And that's one of the things that I think is a good signal. We were very involved in helping recruit the workers with Baker Ripley. And that's like an early discussion point whenever you go work with a business is, how do we find the right workers? This plant has almost 800 workers, and we only needed 15, or I guess we needed 30 because we did 2 classes. How do we find those workers? How do we winnow them down? And that's an early discussion point. Fortunately at Tyson, we have a team that includes me that actually does that work. But that's a good question to ask when you first broach the discussion with a business. Do you know who the workers are you want to train, and how would we identify them? And it's also a place where maybe you can offer your assistance, because remember, the employer may know that there are English literacy challenges or digital challenges, but they may know much less about how best to assess that workforce for those challenges and select those workers for success. So we're going to go through what I call 4 critical elements. And these are things that we'll draw from the research and what we've been learning over the years. Alejandra is going to tell us what it looks like in that class and that relationship, and really engage in a discussion. And I'm so happy to see the questions coming in into the chat, and we will get to those as we go through, because I'm sure you're going to have plenty as we move forward here. So the first element here is building the relationship. And that was definitely something that I think building the relationship was so quick. And before I turn it over to Angela and Alejandra, I really want to say a few things about getting the right people on the bus. There's 2 sides to this. First, one is the adult education program. There are some folks that live and die doing workplace literacy programs, but they're kind of a rare breed, but they're there. And then there are some that really are scared off by such a relationship, or they've never done it, so they're not too sure about it. And then there's some in the middle actually that are kind of interested and eager, and maybe they're the ones that we want to like bring on the bus with us. But as a manager, I think it's really important for you to determine anybody that's going to come have interface with the business. Are they ready to do that? Are they prepared to do that? Are they the right person in the organization to do that? I remember an example myself where a program director was really the person that you would kind of by default think was the person that should go to a meeting. But she called me one day and said, you know, I'm really uncomfortable doing this. I'm a grade school teacher for 30 years, and now I'm managing adult ed towards my retirement. I'm a fish out of water, and I don't want to say no to this relationship. And I just threw out the idea, and I said, well, it didn't have to be you. It's just somebody else. And she go, oh yeah, we have this IET teacher. She would love this. I said, well, empower her, prepare her to go be your project manager and kind of anoint her. And so be ready to make a brave decision like that. Sometimes maybe the director is not the best person, although that's kind of the rank ordered person you think ought to go, because you really want to have that first engagement be super, super successful. Other things I would say is the instructor is instrumental. And finding an instructor that is eager to do this, has maybe done an engagement, maybe not with an employer, but maybe with an IET or a workforce program in some way. Find some way to find that instructor work. Sometimes we get obsessed by, scheduling against our calendar, and we don't want to be flexible when it comes to kind of swapping classes around. But if you're going in with a business, consider that a big fish that you want to land, and the instruction has got to be critical. When I was at the local level, I always told my staff, like, we need the first 10 minutes of class to be amazing and the first class to be phenomenal. We don't have a week to win people's hearts over. And sometimes we kind of think that in education, we can have a slow ramp up, but that first engagement on the project manager side as well as the instruction side is critical. And then if I speak 1 second on the business side, oftentimes the first contact with the business is not the best. And so keep that in mind. A lot of times these relationships come up during a luncheon where you're hobnobbing with somebody at a workforce board meeting and you meet a business representative from a company. They may be kind of the intermediary to get to the right person. And I think one of the key factors is finding out who really knows where the pain point is in the company, who really understands the frontline staff. It may be a training manager, it may be somebody in HR, it may be a supervisor in the plant or business. So kind of keep those things down. But I want to hand it over to Angela and Alejandra to share a few of your thoughts on this topic of getting the right people on the bus.
So I absolutely agree that this will make or break your project, from the teacher to the project manager, and then finding the right person within the organization. Often people will ask me, well, how do you identify the right person in an organization? And I don't think there's one answer. So oftentimes it's from a colleague who's doing some similar work, some networking, or as Anson mentioned earlier, you develop a reputation where businesses recognize that you're an educational institution or you're a social impact agency, but you don't exactly move at the speed of education. You move at the speed of business. And I looked through the participant list and I saw that one of our fabulous partners, Merrick Brothers Construction, is actually here, Sabra. Hi, Sabra. And so trying to understand how to rise to the needs and the challenges that the organization is facing. And then, specifically, once you get people to the table or once you get the attention, once you find the right person, as Anson said, this may not be the time for a project. So you keep kind of warming the relationship and sending information, being present and making offers and trying to find the piece of the puzzle where it fits, where you could be an answer to whatever their challenge might be. And then, of course, being clear about your role and how you respect their role within the organization, because they have a primary job to do. And oftentimes it's not the adult education liaison. And so how can you communicate to that employer, to that right person once you find them, the best way to show that you will have support for the project in the plant or the company so that you don't overwhelm their already busy schedule. And then, of course, always listening for challenges and problems and seeing where you can add value to something that they already have, some training or something in process and in progress related to training, and add some capacity, enhance it, incentivize it wherever you can, and bring the specialization that you have as an adult education provider to that project and to that company. It's priceless. And so, there's so many things that you could do. We don't have the time to talk about it all today, but I think just really customizing your approach, focusing on the needs of that employer and being as brief, less bureaucracy as possible, leave the acronyms at home, speak plain language, and focus on the solution.
Excellent. And I'll see if Alejandra wants to add to that. I wanted to say a few things about what you said. One is, finding the right person at the company is critical. And I see this all the time in our projects at Tyson. And, once you may not have the right person in the first meeting, but by your questions and your kind of listening, be ready to start asking questions about, well, who does this, or who does the recruitment for the organization, or who is the supervisor for these workers, and start to broaden your understanding, but also help the business understand maybe that they're not the right person, or maybe they need to bring some other people to the table. The other thing, maybe down to the next meeting, once you get to the second meeting, is you do want to start moving higher up the food chain at the company, because that's going to be a critical element of sustainability. And I see the successful relationships don't rely on like a training manager only, but they get up to an HR manager, or maybe the business complex manager, at least to share a best practice or to somehow engage. So it's one of these things. I think just the bottom line message is your first contact maybe not be the best, but it definitely isn't going to be your only contact as you kind of grow. The other thing I would say that Angela mentioned that I thought was real important was it may not be the best time to do the project. And that is so true. A lot of times at the very beginning, they're reacting to a critical element or a need. And but when you get in there and start to talk with the business, maybe it's later down the road where it'd be better to plan effectively to get the program to start, not in a month, but maybe in 3 or 4 months. And so be ready for that, and helping the business kind of understand what maybe is needed to get things up and running in a successful way. I've seen a lot of people rush into workplace literacy programs and they quickly rush out because they weren't ready to do it and they didn't develop the relationship enough as they did that. So I always think in that first meeting, your goal is really not to land a class. Your goal is to land a successful relationship. And for the business who may have never worked with a school before, never worked with the public sector before, that they can go home thinking that day, wow, I worked with the school district, or I worked with the college today, and that was a great meeting. They were really insightful, period. You're not leaving with necessarily the class ready to go. But we're so driven sometimes by enrollments that we're just trying to rush to that finish line of getting a class started. But that first engagement, I think, is so important to just have that successful kind of first step going. So after we go and get the right people on the bus, I really wanted to talk about building the right relationship. And this goes back to this idea of coming in as a consultant, as Alejandra was saying, as a problem solver. And always remember that your core competency as an adult educator is the underskilled population. And the employer is probably not the most expert at the underskilled population. A lot of times these workers have high turnover. They're sometimes temporary workers. And so they've always just kind of dealt with the kind of quote unquote challenges of the low skilled population, but they haven't built a competency there often. I mean, sometimes they have, but often not. And that's where you come in as an expert. So you may be afraid, oh, I've never worked with a business before, but you do come in with some great expertise for the business. But Alejandra, tell us a little bit about your perspective working over there with Tyson and your experience in terms of building that relationship. What has been successful? Tell our audience.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, I think that the key really to the success of this program was coming to the table with that consulting approach, right? Asking the local manager there, the person that we really needed to negotiate with, what is the problem? What is it that you want to solve? How can we help you? right? So it was very interesting. There was some negotiation involved. He wanted at the beginning to solve like many problems, and we had to negotiate, and we know what we can do and we know what we cannot. There was some uncertainty there because we, at that point, we didn't know the team members yet, right? So we were, just wanted to make sure that we could deliver at least the one or two solutions that the client was looking for. And by client, I mean this local manager, right? So it's really asking what are the pain points but really on a day-to-day basis, like asking the local manager, okay, what is it that you do during the day, right? That really takes away that time that you value and you really treasure. And then he said, well, I spend like 80% of my day just trying to help team members with resetting their passwords, right? So we said, okay, so let's work on that. And that's how we had to adapt our curriculum, because of course, what we don't teach that on a daily basis, right? It's not even, sometimes we don't even think that that is a problem, but that is a real problem for the local manager at Tyson. So it was really about coming with that approach, asking for what solution are you looking for? How can we help you? And let's sit together and develop a solution for that problem that you're facing on a day-to-day basis. And of course, you have to have that consulting approach, not only like as a coordinator, but you also have to have that with all the team that is going to be behind the project, right? Starting by the instructor, of course. And also we had also volunteers participating in this program. So everyone had to have that in mind, that we are here to help a client, Tyson, solve a problem. And that's how we're going to be successful. So that's definitely the first thing. The second thing is supporting the employer with the recruitment efforts. And this was beneficial for both like the employer, but also for us, because that was really the first time that we got to see the team members and really understand who would be our participants. So it was key to be there in that recruitment effort. It was key to be able to talk to the team members. It was key that they saw us as well, because at the beginning they were saying, okay, who's these people? They've never seen us before in the plant, right? So being able to be there and being able to, speak their language, right? And being able to tell them, hey, this is going to be your teacher. That person that is talking to someone else, she's going to be your teacher. And then having the teacher there was absolutely key, because they started to believe in us. And not only the team members, I will say also, the other stakeholders at Tyson, right? They could see like who were really Baker Ripley people, right? Because yes, everyone in Houston, I think, knows about Baker Ripley, but not anyone knows, the people that make up Baker Ripley. So that was really, really important. And also it was a relief, really, because this was right for our program, specifically digital literacy, the first time that we got out of Zoom and out of Teams and in real life, real people, face to face. So that was really key. It also was a very good way to start learning about the, knowing the learning environment, right? How the plan looks like, how the people look like, et cetera, et cetera. So this was a very different recruitment effort, right? And that is also what makes it challenging and also interesting. In general, we have the people that join our regular digital literacy classes are interested in our classes. They know they need those classes. In Tyson, we came to offer a service, right? To offer something, like we were selling something to the team members. And there was some kind of, level of apprehension again, because they don't know who you are. I mean, when I say they, I mean the team members, right? Who are these people again? What do they want from us, right? So it makes it different, because we went there really to sell a service, just digital literacy classes and digital literacy training. So that makes the whole recruitment effort very different. So again, this also required that the people that were there from Baker Ripley during the recruitment had that clear, right? We are here to solve a problem for a client, and we want to sell these classes to them. And finally, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, finish up.
So finally, communication, right? So we had this permanent communication with the Tyson stakeholders, of course. We discussed the progress of our efforts in the plant. We were able to, again, being flexible from the beginning, right? So for example, we wanted to have like 2 classes, 15 people each. And at the end of the day, we got like 10 in the first class and then 20 in the second class. And we said, yeah, let's do it. If that's the people that we need to serve, we will do it like that. So having this conversation, ongoing conversation really with the team members yes, they are all team members at Tyson. But with the local manager and the people involved with the project was super important. We kept the communication channels open at all time. And I want to say here that the goal of every meeting for us, for Baker Ripley teams, was to end every meeting with a big smile on their faces. So that was great. So building the relationship again, based on communication, consulting approach, and building trust, really. That is the key, I guess.
All right. I love these examples, and I want to share one real quick, and in the last 10 minutes get to our other questions. And it goes back to like being the problem solver. And there, Alejandra was telling us about like, I just need help with them resetting their passwords, and that's a core competency we have for sure. And that's what the manager needed. I have one. I remember I did all this prep for a program in Odessa, Texas, that was in the oil field business. And I thought they were, I kind of assumed what they needed, safety training and all this kind of stuff. These were welders and most of them English language learners. And when I went and described it to the owner, what I was planning to teach, he said, well, that all sounds great, but I was just hoping to have them come in on a Monday morning and tell me how their weekend was. And I realized that what he wanted was to build community with his workers. Safety was important, but he was getting the job done with safety, but it was about the community and about listening well. And I think that's where Alejandra is really guiding us to, is being that problem solver. So let's talk about managing expectations here. This is another huge area where we see programs stumble. And I wanted to kind of just mention that I think you definitely want to make sure that you're not overcommitting as an adult education program, but that you can help the business know what is possible. And a lot of times, this old kind of stereotype of the manager says he wants them all to get a GED in 6 weeks. I've actually never heard anybody say that, but I hear people say that in the adult education community. But that is where our competency comes in as a consultant, as Alejandra was saying. And we need to say like, well, let's like take this in manageable chunks and really find out what is the reason that the manager, for example, wants them to get a GED or to learn a certain skill. And that is this listening skill. And then really sharing with them what is possible in a class at the very beginning. And then, of course, delivering on that. I'm going to turn it over to Angela or Alejandra to talk about this context in Houston in terms of how you're managing expectations and designing for success.
Mm-hmm. So, it's always a very delicate balance, because certainly the employer has some very specific goals. Actually, I'll back up and say sometimes it's not so specific. You might get 10 different problems that they're asking for you to participate in solving for. So part of the first thing I would suggest that you do in developing a very reciprocal, productive relationship is some goal setting. We do goal setting with our students often, but we need to do this with employers as well, so that we can really understand what the challenges are, and then take the information back to our team to really decide what's in our capacity to be able to support them with. Oftentimes in the first project, first iteration, as we are here with Baker, Ripley, and Tyson, we reached for a smaller goal. Again, the program manager, he wanted three. He had three very specific platforms that he wanted the TMs to be familiar with. And we felt, well, we really needed a win. We wanted everyone to walk away from this first engagement really feeling good about the work that they've done, providing a service to the TM, but finding that delicate balance. And so being able to set that part of the project up early on, and communicate that information across the entire project and everybody involved, all of the management and stakeholders at Tyson was very important. And then the communication with the project managers at Tyson, critical. We always have, of course, formal communication where we have all of these goals set in the MOU, and listing out everything that we will do and what we expect from the project. But then informal communication is as important, because that's the information that you give employers along the way. And these for the employers are priceless. And so it's the highlights from the class. It's information about the participants using their exact names, and instead of a number, instead of saying 3 students did X, Y, and Z, it's, John did X, Y, and Z, and Sarah did X, Y, and Z. That's priceless information. So, when we're managing expectations, again, level setting with an MOU, and then being able to communicate those critical points in the MOU along the way in formal and informal communication. Data is important. We're so lucky to have Alejandra on our team, and Ali is great with data. So she has wonderful data sets and graphs, and she communicates very, very clearly, formally, and then also informally, the status of the project to the Tyson team.
Fantastic. And I'm just thrilled to hear these points. And as we close out, we've got a few minutes left here. I want to go through the next element there and share some closing remarks. But one thing I wanted to remind the group too is this project you're hearing about with such articulation is only 6 weeks old. So this has been rapid acceleration, but you can see that it's also being done by some great talent there. But a lot of thinking going in at the very beginning of this in terms of building that partnership for success. This last slide I'll do so we can move on to the closing remarks is about really understanding the context of learning. And here, this is really about getting into the plant or into the business and learning what the environment was like. We brought in Alejandra and her team to do the recruitment, to meet the workers. I love this picture because it kind of shows you also the context of the plant. A Tyson plant is in some parts of the plant 34 degrees, and these workers come in with heavy coats and hats and like they're coming out of a blizzard in the middle of Houston, Texas on July. And then other parts of the plant may be really warm. And so it's things like that too. I mean, these workers are working hard jobs. You're trying to get them to engage and get focused on computer literacy. And sometimes you need to be really cognizant of that learning context. As we kind of close out here, I really wanted to just make some remarks here about seeing the employer as a customer. And I think you heard that over and over from Angela and Alejandra. And this focus on getting that first meeting right so you can make it to the next one. And these are some, mistakes that I think you see in the research literature, but they're so common that I always just like to kind of outline these pitfalls. One is assuming that the employer knows that you exist, assuming they understand what you do, making the assumption employers don't care about frontline workers. I hear that. It's so disappointing, and it is not the case. They want to invest in these workers. It costs a lot of money to lose a frontline worker. So there are those kind of mistakes. And then these other ones here that assuming the employer knows adult education even exists. that is something that's many employers say, we didn't know you were even in our community. And so that's a branding thing that we have to work on. But I think if you just look at some of these mistakes that are very common, and it all goes back to the simple quality of listening well. And you heard Alejandra and Angela listening well, making mid-course corrections just 6 weeks ago. And that means they didn't have their mind made up. They had to really bump and roll with where the needs were for the business. So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank these panelists. We've got a lot of great feedback. This presentation will be made live, so you can go show it to your friends and colleagues. And we look forward to closing out the day with you in our final session in just a few minutes. And you'll see me back there pushing for Behind Every Employer, a fantastic initiative to help bring businesses and adult education providers together. Thank you.